Hi, I'm Charlotte and I'm introducing the book Icosmo by Carlie Sorosiak. It's about a dog, a golden retriever called Cosmo, and his family are falling apart from divorce. So he tries to help, and it's a really good book, and I recommend it. You should read it.
Hi everyone, my name is Carlie Sorosiak and I'm the author of Icosmo, which is this book right here. It's actually narrated by a golden retriever named Cosmo, who is loving and funny and kind, and he's trying really hard to keep his human family together through a difficult year. And he does this by entering a doggy dancing competition. So if you're a dog person, I really think that Icosmo could be a new favorite book for you. And I'm really delighted to be here at Big Dog Book Festival to talk to you about it today. Firstly, I'd love if you could do something for me. I want you to think about an animal that you've met in your life. Maybe it's a dog like Cosmo, or a really fluffy cat, or even a tortoise or a rabbit or some sort of bird. Maybe you even have a pet or two at home. So you have that in your mind. Are you picturing them? Okay, good. Now I want you to think about why they're really, really awesome. And maybe they're extremely kind, or they have a really big heart. Maybe they're mischievous or are always kind of getting themselves into funny situations. And these are a lot of things that I think about when writing, and especially when writing Icosmo, because I grew up with a golden retriever called Ralphie. Ralphie was enormous. So when I was 13 years old, he was almost as big as I was, and he had this incredible smile. And not many people know this, but actually dogs can laugh, and Ralph had this really, really wonderful like ho, ho, ho laugh, and he was always getting into all sorts of trouble. Like, for example, in the book, Cosmo starts sniffing something, and he's kind of like, what is that smell? And as it turns out, it's goose poop. So Cosmo starts digging and digging and digging and digging in the dirt and trying to find out more about that smell. Well, as you can imagine, he makes quite a mess. So then he eats the evidence. He eats all the dirt. And that is actually a true story. So one day, my dog Ralphie dug a bunch of holes in the backyard, and then he munched up all the dirt. So he was really, really silly. And I think you can take inspiration from all sorts of things that happen in your life, especially when it comes to animals. So if you have a really special animal in your life, could you write a story about them? Could you imagine yourself as a cat named Mittens or a dog named Ruffles? How would you walk? How would you pounce? How would you trot? How would you describe that? Authors think about all of these things. So when I write, I always start with an animal, and then I try to learn everything I can about that animal. Things like dogs can smell emotions. They see the entire world with their noses. So if you went outside to a swimming pool and you dropped a teaspoon of sugar, just a little bit of sugar, into the swimming pool, and then you swirled it around, a dog could come by and they could smell that sugar through all the water, through all the chlorine. That's how good their noses are. And I learned other things, like rats can giggle. they're really ticklish. And wombats, which are kind of like these really giant guinea pigs, they actually poop in perfect cubes. And I love that fact. And when I was researching Icosmo, I also got to learn a lot about doggy dancing competitions. Have you ever seen one? If you have an adult caregiver around, I'd really urge you to Google a doggy dancing competition together, because these dogs are so adorable and so talented. They twirl and jump on command, and they can walk backwards, and some can even walk on their hind legs. It's incredibly impressive. I'd recommend watching, if you haven't already, Ashley and Pudsy's 2012 audition for Britain's Got Talent, or any of the World Championship canine freestyle performances. So I've done a lot of wonderful events for Icosmo, and I've saved some of my very favorite questions asked from students all over the world, and I thought I'd answer a few of them here today. So the first question is, were any characters in Icosmo modeled after anyone in your life? And I love this question. It's a really good one. And the answer is yes. So absolutely, Cosmo is just like my golden retriever, Ralphie, although Ralphie could not dance. I also had two other golden retrievers named Buddy and Faith, and right now I have what's called an American Dingo. Her name is Danny, and I really think that she has the soul of a dancer. So she's learning some tricks right now, and she's getting better. As far as human characters, Uncle Reggie in the book Icosmo is based on my Uncle Mike, who was also very, very supportive. So the next question is, what made you decide to become an author? I have always wanted to tell stories. So I wrote my first novel between the ages of 9 and 12, which might be the age of some of you listening right now. And I was so enthusiastic about it. I worked on it almost every day. And at the end of the 4 years, I read it back as a whole, and I realized that it had almost no plot. It was just a bunch of people really happily riding around on horses all day. But even so, even though it didn't really have a lot of the traditional elements of a story, I knew then that I had the power to finish something. So if you want to write a book one day, or if you want to write a book now, it's important to practice starting things, and it's important to try to finish things. Just try your best. I'd start really small. So maybe just start with a few sentences. Maybe you could describe an animal that you really love. Maybe you could even just describe the way their fur looks, and then you can build it up from there. Lots of authors might start with plot or the storyline, kind of the nitty-gritty of actually what's happening, and they want to develop it. But you could also start with a character like Cosmo. You can start with a dog, you can start with a cat, or maybe you could start with a landscape like your own backyard, back garden, your living room, or maybe even, something you've just completely made up, a magical kingdom. Or you could start with an idea. And the big thing is to start with an idea that really, really excites you. So during the day, I teach creative writing students at the university. And I always encourage them to think about, when do you know that an idea really excites you? Like, how do you know? And maybe you think of this idea and you just start laughing. Maybe you start giggling, or you can't stop smiling when you think about it. Like maybe you're washing the dishes or riding the bus and the story is just constantly playing in loop in your mind. And it's a little bit different for everyone. So maybe you'd like to write a story, but you have trouble coming up with ideas. So here's what I do. You can ask the question, what if? And one of my favorite authors is a writer called Neil Gaiman, and he tells this brilliant story about the question, what if? And I'm going to do my best to repeat it for you right now. So to begin with, werewolves. If a werewolf bites you on a full moon, you will also turn into a werewolf. Okay, so that's a pretty common fact. We've got that. If a werewolf bites you in a full moon, you will also turn into a werewolf. But what if on a full moon, a werewolf is absent-mindedly chewing on a chair, like this chair, for instance, does that chair transform too? Does it become a chair wolf? And what would a chair wolf look like when it morphs? Would I be sitting in this chair when the full moon is rising and kind of the legs of the chair are getting hairier and hairier? How would the chair wolf move? Could it chase you up the stairs? And all of these questions, all these wonderful scenarios that come from just asking that one question. And again, if you have the opportunity to hear Neil Gaiman speak, he tells this story much better than I do. But I did the same thing for Cosmo. I asked myself the question, what if? What if a dog thought that he was responsible for saving his family? What if he really, really wanted to dance? What if he loved his boy so fiercely that he couldn't stand to be apart from him? And if you are stuck, if you want to be a writer, continually ask yourself the question, what if? Another question I've been asked about Icosmo is how long did it take me to write it? All in all, with drafting this book and then all the editing that came afterwards, Icosmo took me about a year, but every book is different. So the book that I wrote after Cosmo is called My Life as a Cat, and I wrote the last third of the book in 3 days. I was really motivated. But I'm also not always writing. Sometimes I take long breaks and I don't write for many months. Sometimes I end my workday at noon and I watch TV, or I take my dog for a nice walk in the park. It all depends on how I'm feeling and also when my deadlines are. So one of the best questions I've ever been asked is, at any point during Icosmo, did you ever feel like giving up? And the truth is, sometimes having your work out in the world can feel very stressful. So maybe there was a time when you've written something or drawn something or created something and you were a little bit scared to share it with someone. That happens to me too sometimes. But I try to keep in mind what I really, really love to do, and that's writing. And one of the things about being a writer is that you need to write for yourself and write for what you love, and write what you would want to read. And that's how you keep the joy in it. So occasionally I do have these thoughts of like, well, maybe I should become a goat farmer, or, go back to school and help animals in another way. But for right now, I really love what I'm doing. And the final question I'd like to answer today is, if you could be any animal, what would you be? And I think very specifically, I'd be my dog Danny, because she's very spoiled and loves to eat peanut butter. And she spends a lot of the day sleeping in sunspots around the house. But I also think it would be super cool to be a flying frog and kind of jump from tree to tree in this kind of massive rainforest canopy. Being an orca would also be really awesome, or an owl or a fox, and it's obviously really difficult to choose. And maybe you could ask yourself the same question, what if you could be any animal, what would you be? Take a sip of water here. So right now we are going to play a little game that some of you may be familiar with, and it is called True or False. So I'm going to give you 4 statements about dogs, just like Cosmo, and I want you to think about it or shout it out if you think that they are true or false. Okay, you ready? Here's the first one. There once was a dog named Bobby the Wonder Dog who traveled 2,551 miles by himself to reunite with his owners who'd accidentally lost him. And I'll say that one more time. There was once a dog named Bobby the Wonder Dog who traveled 2,551 miles by himself on foot to reunite with his owners who'd accidentally lost him. What do you think? Is that true or false? So that is amazing, but true. So if you know American geography at all, he trotted all the way from Indiana to Oregon on his own. Like, how did he even know where he was going? Remember that we talked about dogs and their kind of amazing senses of smell. He was probably following the scent of his humans as they stopped at different gas stations along the way. I just think that that's really amazing and wild, but true. The next statement. A dog's mouth is cleaner than a human's mouth. What do you think? True or false? This one is false, and you might want to think twice before sharing an ice cream cone with your dog. Their saliva and also the inside of their mouths contains different types of bacteria that can be harmful to humans. Plus, dogs like to lick a number of things that we might view as gross. Again, Cosmo ate the goose poop, and there's actually debate whether his mouth is cleaner than a human's in the book, but that is false. Third statement. Dogs rely on Earth's magnetic fields in order to poop. I'll read that again. Dogs rely on Earth's magnetic fields in order to poop. True or false? So this is another strange one, but it is true. So actually, Cosmo does this in the book as well. Like, have you ever wondered why dogs circle around before they poop? It's because they're trying to find the exact right spot. I never knew, but actually, according to one scientific study, they're just very in tune with the earth. So when they're circling, they're actually lining themselves up along the kind of north-south axis. Who knew? Fourth statement. All dogs want to be pet. All dogs want to be pet. This is actually false. So not all dogs want to be pet. You might see a super cute dog in the park and kind of rush over to pet it, but some dogs really like their space and they might find it threatening when strangers approach them. And Cosmo talks about this in the book too. So think of it this way. If a stranger darted up to you on the street and then kind of ran their fingers through your hair, how would you react? Dogs value politeness just as we do. So maybe asking the owner, like, may I pet your dog? That's a good start. Also notice how the dog reacts. If she's licking your hands or loosely wagging her tail and the owner says, go ahead, then it's probably safe. And the final statement is dogs are as smart as a 2-year-old human. Dogs are as smart as a 2-year-old human. Is that true or false? So that is true. And in some ways, they're actually even smarter. So in Moscow, there are some dogs that have actually taught themselves to ride the metro, like the tube in London. And they commute with humans in the morning, or they did before COVID, kind of entirely on their own. So no collars, no leashes, no people. They're just a bunch of strays navigating this complex underground system from memory, which is amazing. Occasionally they'll hop off for maybe like a gentle head scratch, and then they'll hurry aboard to explore new places. And I think that Cosmo probably believes he's as smart as these dogs. So I'm actually going to go ahead and read you just a few pages from the first chapter of Icosmo to give you a bit of sense of Cosmo's intelligent voice. This year, I'm a turtle. I do not want to be a turtle. His tail's between his legs, Max notices, cocking his head. Worry spreads across his wonderful face. You think the hat's too tight? We are on the porch, and the strange pumpkin is smiling at us, the one Max carved last week, scooping out its guts. I eat the seeds even though he told me, no, Cosmo, no. I find it difficult to stop myself when something smells so interesting and so new. Max's father, whose name is Dad, readjusts the turtle vest on my back. Nah, he's fine. He loves it. Look at him. This is one of those times, those infinite times, when I wish my tongue did not loll in my mouth, because I would say, in perfect human language, that turtles are inferior creatures who cannot manage to cross roads. And I've crossed many roads off leash by myself. This costume is an embarrassment. At a loss, I roll gently onto my back, kicking my legs in the air. An ache creaks down my spine. I'm not young like I used to be, but hopefully Max will understand the subtle meaning in my gesture. Dad, I really think he doesn't. Yes, Max, yes. Scratching the fur on his chin, Dad says to me, okay, no hat, but you've got to keep the shell. And just like that, a small victory. Emmeline burst onto the porch then. She is all energy. She glows. Cosmo! Her little hands ruffle my ears, and it reminds me why I'm a turtle in the first place. Because Emmeline picked it out. Because it made her happy. I've long accepted that this is one of my roles. Max grabs Emmeline's hand and spins her around like they're dancing. Her purple superhero cape twirls with the movement. Last week, I helped Mom make the costume, guarding the fabric, keeping watch by her feet, and every once in a while, she held up her progress and asked me, "What do you think, Cosmo?" "A wonder," I told her with my eyes. "It is a wonder." "Shouldn't we wait for Mom?" Max asks. He is dressed in dark colors, patches on his shirt, and I suppose he's a cow or a giraffe, although I do not like thinking of him as either. Giraffes are remarkably stupid creatures, and Max is very, very smart. He can speak 3 languages, build model rockets, and fold his tongue into a 4-leaf clover. He can even unscrew the lids off peanut butter jars. I'd like to see a giraffe do that. Dad replies, "She's late, don't want to miss out on all the good candy." Max says, "I just think," but Dad cuts him off with, "Ready, Freddie," which he is fond of saying, despite the fact that Max is called Max. After a pause, the 4 of us set off into the bluish night. Our house is a 1-story brick structure with plenty of grass and a swing set that only Emmeline uses now. Paper lanterns line the driveway, lighting up the cul-de-sac. The fur on the back of my neck begins to rise. Halloween is the worst night of the year. If you disagree, please take a moment to consider my logic. 1. Most Halloween candy is chocolate. My 4th Halloween, I consumed 6 miniature Hershey's bars and was immediately rushed to the emergency vet, where I spent 4 hours with an incredible tummy ache. 2. Young humans jump out from behind bushes and yell, "Boo!" This is confusing. One of my best friends, a German short-haired pointer, is named Boo. 3. Clowns. 4. Golden retrievers, like myself, are too dignified for costumes. I'm not entirely opposed to raincoats if the occasion arises, but there is a line. For example, Mom bought me a cat costume once, and I have yet to wholly recover from the trauma. 5. The sheepdog is let loose. And the sheepdog, if you've read Cosmo, becomes a huge part of the story after this. And if you haven't read Cosmo, you just have to read on to figure out what happens next. But it has been a huge pleasure speaking with you today about Icosmo and my journey with this book. And now I have some challenges for you. And you can tackle any or all of these follow-up activities, and they're all writing prompts, and they're really great for stretching your imagination. So the first activity is to write 3 to 5 sentences from the perspective of an animal, any animal. Think about how that particular animal would view the world. Would they use their sense of sight or maybe their sense of smell? And if you'd like to write more than 5 sentences, go ahead. Number 2 is to write 10 sentences about someone who discovers an animal in their back garden. And at first, it looks like a normal animal, but then it does something extraordinary. So for example, maybe that fox in your back garden is actually magical. Maybe he can fly. And activity 3 is to free write. So write for 10 minutes about the first thing that pops into your mind. And you might want to even answer the question, what if? On the website from my publisher, Nosy Crow, you can also find 3 wonderful activity sheets for Cosmo. You can take a canine quiz, do Cosmo's woof search, and you can even draw your own perfect pet. So what would your dream pet look like? I hope that you enjoy these activities. And again, thank you so much for listening, and happy reading.